How soon do you think it could be before there is real fighting here?
I just... It's awful they couldn't come with you. What you read about what's happening on the ground.
Where were you at the exact time of the attack?
If that is what you think of him, how do you sit across the table to try to stop the war?
And we're live in 5, 4, 3.
Want to understand what the news means for you? BBC News Catch Up on Sounds is a new playlist that puts you in control and lets you explore the stories you're interested in. From breaking headlines...
There's been a wave of missile strikes across Ukraine.
...to deep dive podcasts and current analysis.
The longer the conflict goes on, the more chance there is just something happening that leads to an escalation.
Make sense of the stories you care about whenever suits you. Open the BBC Sounds app, tap podcasts for News Catch Up.
Following the Fed, markets fall over warnings of further rate rises as the head of America's central bank faces a second day in front of lawmakers. And taking a backseat, we look at the driverless car that could revolutionise the way we get around. Hello, welcome along. This is World Business Report. I'm Ben Thompson, and we're going to start in the United States, where all eyes are once again on the head of the central bank and his efforts to try and tame rising prices. In the next hour or so, Jerome Powell is due for a second day of testimony in front of lawmakers there, and his words literally move markets. On Tuesday, he warned that the price of borrowing, that is the base US interest rate, may have to be raised many more times than hoped, and that markets are quickly nervous with a sell-off in the US and Asia. Let me show you what's happening so far in Europe, and this is a state of play, inheriting some of that uncertainty that started in the US, translated through to Asia. And there's a little bit of kind of calm coming back to those numbers, but nonetheless, markets are still trying to work out what all of this could mean for them. Let's speak to Samira, who is standing by in New York for us. Samira, talk to me a little bit about what we heard yesterday, and I suppose why markets are nervous about what could be coming down the line.
You know, Ben, when we spoke on Monday, we talked about the kind of message that Jerome Powell is going to have to deliver, and it may not be a message that anyone wants to hear. Well, that certainly turned out to be true. Now, look, last year, the Federal Reserve raised interest rates at the fastest rate since the 80s, and it seemed to have helped the rate of inflation somewhat. But the problem has always been the jobs report. The labor market continues to show a lot of resilience. And that's why the Fed chair, Jerome Powell, basically said, well, you know what? You can probably expect faster rate increases because they're trying to cool down the economy. Have a listen.
The latest economic data have come in stronger than expected, which suggests that the ultimate level of interest rates is likely to be higher than previously anticipated. If the totality of the data were to indicate that faster tightening is warranted, we'd be prepared to increase the pace of rate hikes.
So obviously no one liked that message because he basically said, okay, the interest rate rises that you've been seeing, we're going to be more aggressive with them, and we're going to be more aggressive longer.
Yes, and I suppose it's that idea of this higher interest rate environment being around for a lot longer than many thought, and that idea there saying that given the strength of the data, we will stay the course until the job is done. I suppose the big question is, when is that job done?
And all of that is really going to depend on the data that they receive. So even this week, we're going to see the latest jobs report. And so that will offer us a snapshot of the strength of the labor market. And remember, that's going to be the last jobs report that the Fed officials will see before their meeting March 21st, 22nd, or March 20th, 21st, when we're going to see the next interest rate hike. But if you ask a lot of Fed watchers and, you know, those those who are, on traders in financial markets and Wall Street, I think pretty much everyone expects that there's going to be 0.5 percentage rate rise at this next meeting, and we'll see then what happens subsequently.
Feels like all of our diaries are determined by what the Fed does right now. Samira, thank you. I'm not going to hold you to those dates. Thanks very much, Samira, saying they're live in New York. Now, here's a question for you. Would you take a ride in a self-driving car through the streets of London, or any city for that matter? Well, for the past 3 years, a team in Woolwich, near London, have been deliberately sending autonomous cars out to tackle traffic as part of a government-backed research project. Our correspondent Theo Leggett has been finding out how they work.
A chaotic mix of cars, buses, lorries and pedestrians. The roads of Woolwich in southeast London are challenging enough for any driver. But the car I'm going to ride in doesn't actually need one.
The car is now in autonomous mode.
It's a self-driving vehicle festooned with cameras, laser guidance systems, GPS and radar. The Serve City project's been running for 3 years, operated by a consortium including Nissan, the Transport Research Laboratory and Nottingham University.
We have tuned the vehicle in such a way that it gels into the environment.
Cars like these have covered some 1,600 miles around here without an accident, although a safety drive is always on hand.
Well, we've been driving around the busy streets of Woolwich for about 5 minutes now. As you can see, I'm in the back seat. I've got a screen in front of me that sees what the car sees. There's a human driver as well, Tom. I don't know what he's doing. He tells me his hands are not on the wheel. Well, from where I'm sitting in the back, it feels exactly the same as if he was driving the car. There's no difference whatsoever. I could be in a normal taxi.
And that, it seems, is exactly the point.
We're trying to expand the boundaries of the current systems that you get on vehicles today. So we want to be able to improve not just the ability to drive on the highway, but then take on complex environments, but most importantly, do it in what we call a human-like feel.
What's unique about this project is that the car doesn't just rely on its own sensors. It also uses data from other sources, such as roadside cameras, to detect possible hazards in advance.
We've been looking at particularly is around things like parked vehicles and buses and bus stops that are beyond the line of sight. So we've been using our roadside cameras and infrastructure to be able to see those situations, a bit like X-ray vision, beyond the line of sight in such a way that that can then be transmitted to the vehicle.
Technology like this is still years away from going mainstream, but the project has shown that the car of the future will not only be able to drive itself, it'll communicate with roadside units, with other cars, and quite possibly with us as well. Theo Leggett, BBC News.
Now, today is International Women's Day. It is a day used around the world to celebrate the accomplishments of women in all sorts of areas, especially business. One of the goals of the campaign is for businesses to focus on equity in the workplace. That's ensuring the right opportunities are opened up for all. But when it comes to hiring, the pool of potential candidates is often weighted in favour of men, particularly at senior levels. Well, Shafali Shankeen is a former corporate executive in the construction industry and now owns a McDonald's franchise running 3 restaurants in West London. Thank you for joining us. It's good to talk to you. I'm just looking at your CV here. You worked in investment banking, then you joined the construction industry. You did all sorts of things there, and then you applied to become a McDonald's franchisee. Talk me through that career progression.
Well, I always wanted my own business and I loved the corporate world, but I didn't feel quite fulfilled. My parents had a snooker club in West London and I watched the joy that they had and I wanted that same fulfillment. So I decided to take the plunge and apply to become a McDonald's franchisee, just to build my own legacy as well and to build a legacy for my daughter, who I want to be able to feel that she can achieve anything that she wants to and the sky's the limit for her.
Yeah,
so I'm in a very lucky situation that I've got 3 restaurants now with over 300 staff and the majority of which are women.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about that actually because, what the skills were that translated from your previous corporate life into your new role. And I suppose the reason we're talking today on International Women's Day, the importance of getting people into those jobs, particularly women in business.
Exactly, so flexibility is key. And I think one of the reasons I have so many women working in my organisation and in McDonald's is because they have the flexibility to be able to work the hours that they wish to work. We don't let growth be restricted by their personal circumstances, and I think that's crucial for males and females really, because everybody's got other commitments. People have got children, they've got parents, they've got other roles as well, other jobs in their heads, so they've got things to do.
What would you say is your top tip when it comes to, we talked there about equity in the introduction. How would you make sure that the opportunities are there for all, but particularly women in this sector?
I think we just need to have a bit more of a level playing field. You know, being a role model and being an inspiration and having people to look up to is crucial. On my first day as a franchisee, 2 women came up to me and said how refreshing it was to have a female boss, because they've never had that before and they've never had that representation. And it's for me to be able to make sure that they can reach their dreams and reach their full potential and empower these women.
It's a lovely message on which to end. Shafali, thank you for talking to us. It's really interesting to hear all these different stories. Thanks very much, Shafali Shankeen there. Now, a quick look at some other business stories for you this hour. The carmaker Volkswagen could focus on the US for battery production. That's after the country launched new incentives worth $10 billion to attract green tech. The move could mean it ditches a project planned for Eastern Europe, but nothing isn't finalised, according to the Financial Times. The firm is waiting, it says, to see how European policymakers respond to the US proposals. If you want to get in touch with me, you can. I'm at BBC Ben Thompson. Much more on the business pages of the BBC website. We'll see you very soon. Bye-bye.
You're watching BBC News. I'm Geetha Gurumuthu. We're bringing you a roundup of some of the other main news today. And a blast of Arctic weather has been sweeping across parts of the UK, causing widespread travel disruption. The Met Office has issued several yellow weather warnings today for snow and ice in parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland and southern England. It's been the coldest night of the year so far, with temperatures plunging to minus 15 degrees in the Highlands. The bitter conditions are expected to last until the weekend. Jenny Kumar reports.
The gritters were out in force across southwest England overnight, but there was still travel disruption across the region and other parts of the UK. Schools closed